We're here with Eric Roth, Brent, of course, and then we have Dr. Madhuli Williams and Dr. Dayamudra Denehi.
Welcome, everybody. So today we are talking a little bit about this, the AI conversation, right? It's getting it's getting all over the place. And so there's ups, there's downs, there's in the middle, all of these types of things. And so we kind of want to talk about just our understanding of the experience at the moment. There's not necessarily, there's not rights and wrongs, right? And I think so many people are trying to position themselves on one side or the other. And we're just trying to share a little bit about what actual experiences teachers are having. Kind of wanted to take a look at each person's situation and a little bit of a brief introduction. So I guess we'll work through some introductions as well, just to tell us a little bit about your setting so that people understand where we're coming from and how it might apply or line up with their setting out there in the world. So Eric, I guess you're unmuted. Can you first just give a brief introduction?
Sure. My name is Eric Roth. I teach at the University of Southern California and the American Language Institute, working mostly with international graduate students. So these are people who've decided to travel thousands of miles to pursue their professional ambitions. And they tend to be kind of micro-specialist. So a typical class of 15 students, you might have 10 countries represented, and 6 different languages, and many different disciplines. So the rubric I like to use, which I think is AI friendly, is everyone is a student, everybody's a teacher, and everyone's kind of sharing their experiences. And we kind of go through it, and some of them are consumer assignments, and because everyone can be a consumer, and some of them are very field specific, and then those are a little bit challenging. But it might be defining an important term or to introduce a significant controversy in your field.
Daya, how about you? What's your what's your setting?
I teach at City College of San Francisco. I teach ESL, English as a Second Language, in the credit and the non-credit divisions. So I teach a whole range of students from sort of community classes to academic. I'm also the distance education coordinator. So I work to coordinate the online program, and I'm very active across the state with the community college educators. And through AI, I've really gotten connected with through AI, other educators really around the world. So I'm on the socials every day, communicating with people in Australia, in Brazil, in Ireland, sort of all over the world, all over the country. So it's been a really big conversation and a real contrast, I think, between sort of the conversations we're all having on LinkedIn. I see the things that Ishel's posting, and Brent, and I follow Eric on there too, and of course Denise, versus our colleges, kind of different conversations happening there. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Thank you. And Denise.
Hi, everyone. Denise Madhuli Williams. I teach at San Diego Miramar Community College in the San Diego Community College District. And I teach both in the English department, and I usually teach the English 101 basic composition courses for the English department. And I also teach in our ELAC department, English Language Acquisition, which is our acronym for teaching English to speakers of multiple languages. And I teach in the credit side of that. So it's a real range of courses that I'm involved with, students from all different language and cultural backgrounds, some that are brand new to the U.S., some that have gone through stages of high school here, but are still learning English. As we know, community colleges accept the top 100% of students. So we have students that range from 18 to 80, returning students, veterans, new moms. I teach classes in person and fully online asynchronously. And for me, I've been kind of tipping into the AI conversation, through social media, through conferences, through all of you. But my focus has really been this semester as a full-time teacher in the classroom is like, what do students know? What are students thinking about this? And that's where my focus has been.
Wonderful. So we have a number of questions, and Michelle, you're going to be kicking us off and leading us through them to start. But I'll hand it over to you.
One of the reasons why I wanted to sit and talk to other instructors, just there seems to be resistance when it comes to all of these AI tools or just AI in general. And I guess I'm curious how you've approached working with colleagues maybe, or just people in general who might resist or shun AI tools in their teaching. What has been your experience? And then has there been anything effective to help maybe calm their fears? Because I feel there are legitimate fears involved, as with any new tool, but navigating resistance.
What I try to do is say that I think it's as much an evolution as a revolution, and that it's a continuum. So it's not just students have been using Grammarly for years, but at my university, we've been using Turnitin for at least 15 years. And Turnitin has all kinds of a wide range of features. Some of them are plagiarism detection or similarity detection devices. Some of them, they have the built-in ETS feature, which is the education, the SAT, TOEFL folks, that give feedback, some accurate and some inaccurate. They're much better at detecting some grammatical errors than others. They're very good on much and many. They're far less effective on article errors. Sometimes they'll just say it's an awkward sentence if it's been too mangled. But I try to assure my colleagues that we've been using AI before. We may not have used ChatGPT until 2022, but we've been using AI tools for a long time. And the second thing I think is useful, and it may be a misstep, and some people may think it's a step away, but I just remind them of how we felt at other points. We had moral panics around Wikipedia, around YouTube, and that I just don't believe in a fear-first sensibility. I think it's a terrible philosophy for educators to be sharing with colleagues. I think we should be enthusiastic and curious and critical, but let's not discount the sheer marvel and playfulness of the technologies. And that's where I think a lot of this is coming from, is a desire to control. Cheating existed before the internet. A lot of this is, I think, exaggerated fears. Now, we'll talk later about the real problems, and there are many real problems. I'm an accuracy, brevity, clarity guy, and there are a lot of AI hallucinations. But this idea that we can teach in 2024 the way we taught in 1924 is just ridiculous. That we have so many wonderful, powerful tools. Let's use them. And students are my perception is my students are going to use it anyway. So the question is whether or not they get the benefit of my skeptical intake and my kind of critical, approach. And let's see how the tools can be used, what the strengths are, and perhaps what the limitations are. Rather than, I just don't feel like they're going to listen to me. I don't want to say don't use them, but they wouldn't listen to me even if I said don't use them. And I don't believe the other teachers have some magical power that I lack. So I just don't understand some of the debates I read in the professional literature. While I'm very respectful and polite, I don't really understand what the gist is. We're living and working in 2024. And we're just, the only time we control the students is when they're in our classroom for 2, 3, 4 hours a week. Let's not exaggerate our power. So I kind of feel like be realistic, and it's part of our contemporary world.
Dia, so I know you've been talking to people all over the place. What are your experiences with the resistance here?
Yeah, I think Eric raised a lot of good points. I guess, if we think about design thinking and we back it up a little bit and start with empathy, right? I think teachers have been really like traumatized over the last few years. So I think that, you know, our school has faced all sorts of leadership crises and financial crises. We're always expected to do more. We have no admin support. And then the pandemic, right? People didn't even want to teach online and they had to. And now they like teaching at home. They don't want to go back. So there's all this stuff going on. And, you know, there hasn't been any kind of reckoning with any of that, like not even a thank you for all you did during the pandemic. You know, we were using our own devices, our own internet connection, our own printers, our own everything. So I think that environment has led to like, oh, what now? You know? And so that's kind of what I'm hearing. It's just this weariness and people just feeling really overwhelmed with what the AI tools are. So I try to start with that, you know, that people are really just exhausted and don't kind of feel like they have the personal bandwidth to explore the tools. So there's that. I kind of agree with Denise of starting with the students. And so I think in terms of teachers, I really think we need to build our own digital literacy. You know, I think I hear people saying things like, can I just turn the AI off? So that just shows a real lack of understanding of what the technology is. I think people who are leading in the community colleges are the librarians. And, you know, when you go to, like, they tell me that when students come to them, their response is, how can I help you? Right? Yeah. That's not what teachers say. The teachers are like this cat and mouse game. Like, are you cheating? Are you not cheating? But I'm learning a lot from the librarians, building my own digital literacy. And I'm really interested in just hearing from the students, what do they know about these tools? What do they know about the challenges, the ethical problems, the biases? What's a good use of these tools? What's a good way of prompting? So those are the conversations I'm engaged in right now. There's a lot of policy talk at my school, but I don't really know how we can build policy if we don't know what the tools are and what they do. So the policy is kind of leading the conversation, and that's sort of a frustration that I've had.
Big things I always talk about, I posted about it several times, is this idea of the grief cycle that we go through, right? And when we're understanding, and I always talk about it, you know, it's like the denial, anger, right? You're going through all these stages and acceptance or whatever level it is. And I think for me, one of the best ways, because I do these workshops or help people talk about these things, and going through that and telling people it's cool to be where you are, it's acceptable, it's good, and it's not a problem if you are in a denial stage or if you are in a acceptance stage or bargaining, whatever stage you're in, right, is part of the process of going through it, because it is a major change to the way that we've understood our jobs and how we interact with things. And so trying to go through those, and then also pointing out that we don't just move from the beginning to the end of that grief stage. Like we cycle back, we kind of revisit those points. And it's something I always talk about every time I talk about the AI thing, because it's, for me, I think it's important for teachers to have the permission to feel what they're feeling about these issues, and good, bad, whatever it is, those are all legitimate as long as we're kind of engaging at some level. So I think that's just kind of links those points together. But Denise, I also want to hear about your point as well.
Daimuja is out there in the field as a real leader and DE coordinator at her college. So she's really having to navigate these other faculty conversations and the policies. But I really liked what Eric was saying about just the playfulness and the joy with new tools. And I remember looking at the cycle of grief, right? Just trying to like pinpoint where I was at that day, on that day, or at that hour, because it's all cyclical. But I think, right now, I think it's a real I'm just very fortunate to be kind of being able to spend my full time in the classroom right now without other roles. So I've kind of just, let the resistance go. Like, I don't feel like it's my job to change other faculty's minds or convince them of this. We are all pressed for time. And like Daimuja said, just like at this point of like coming out of all of the other work that we had to do during COVID to get on board. So to add one more thing feels very overwhelming for people. So, my thing is just to share the little things I learned from students and the little things I try out, and just show this kind of positive curiosity about it without trying to change anyone's mind or force them into, my side. I don't have a side, but
Yeah.
I feel like that lets a lot of things go for me if I just don't worry about what other people are doing. But I also have that opportunity right now because I'm just mostly with students and I'm not having to sit in rooms where people are actively trying to, build policies to resist it or ask these questions like, how do we turn it off? So that's kind of where I am right now.
You've been posting, students' responses to, what their experiences are. I think so few people are really, willing to. Oh, this is what my students are saying. It's just like, this is what I think, and and you're going to deal with what I think. It's like, well, let's actually talk to the students. And so you've been posting some of those, quotes from your students, insights from your students. And so I know that not everybody is necessarily integrating directly into their classroom at the moment, but our kind of question here is looking for insights that you've gained from AI tools into the teaching practice, and how have these AI tools impacted student engagement, learning outcomes, development of critical thinking, et cetera, and with an understanding that doesn't necessarily mean that you're actively using it, but you might be seeing how your students are talking about it, or how your colleagues are talking about it, one way or another. So Denise, because you've been sharing some of those things, I'd like to start with you this time.
I haven't created specific lessons that are specifically for like, now we will use AI. I've seen a lot of those. I was like really enamored with Ishel's lesson where she had students create images based on using AI. And I've seen some really great stuff with grammar and usage from you, Brent. But I haven't done it in that manner. And this is the first semester where I really had included an AI, not a policy, but AI thoughts on my syllabus. I just kind of waited till I really got to that point. I feel like we move really quickly sometimes with these things, and I kind of just wanted gel and think about it. And so I can talk about one particular way that I think has been fun for students with AI in my in-person class, which is just whatever we're doing. If a student has a question or we're like stuck with something, I'll just bring up ChatGPT 4 and just show them a way to look at it so that we're not like assigning it. And for example, we were just they're working on their memoirs, a chapter of a memoir. And, I was talking about, as I always do, about creating catchy titles and what goes into a catchy title, because their titles were all like, just the assignment name. And so I said, well, let's just see what some of these examples might be using AI. And I brought up Copilot, and then I brought up ChatGPT 4 and just said, here's, the topic of my chapter of my writing. What are some examples of titles? And just watch them come up. And they were like, oh my gosh, what is this? And we talked about which titles they liked, which we didn't. I actually took one that I liked and then kind of fiddled with it till I got it to the way I liked it. And then I used that as my title. I didn't tell them to go do that. I didn't, force that, but I just wanted them to see kind of live how you could use that to support you. And then we had this other conversation where we were reading this article, and I was just asking them, what happens when you're reading something? This is with my ELAC class. What happens when you're reading something and you don't understand it? What do you do? And almost every student said, I just go to Google Translate. And I said, well, here's another idea. Let's put this into AI and ask for what are the key takeaways, or what are some questions or some main points that I would want to make sure I get out of this. And then a summary came up and some main points, and we talked about what was missing, or what did they catch all those points. And it was all in English, which is really great. So they're not like translating this big document, but we just kind of had this healthy conversation about how it could support their learning. And then the last thing is that in my classes, they're always working towards the final digital portfolio. And students are very invested in this because they're adding their stories, they're being creative in how they add video and pictures from their lives. So they're really invested in how this comes out. They wouldn't turn to AI to cheat or like do it for them because this is their story. But AI, as Eric said, pops up in everything. So we're using Adobe Express. And right away, when it pops up, you can have that opportunity to kind of magic write a bio paragraph or have an example of it about me. So they can look at that structure and then they can compare it to theirs, and then they can make sure it's theirs. They're not using some AI generated about me, because what does AI know about them? But they're able to see the format and the structure and then apply it to their own writing, which is a great way to merge that. And again, those are all examples that just kind of happen on the fly in my classroom. I didn't prepare a lesson on them. But I think that they are examples of how we can be inclusive with it, without, without scaring the students or without making it seem like I'm trying to find out how you cannot cheat using this. But these are ways that it can be supportive of you.
Dia, so continuing with this this conversation, insights, students and or teachers, what have you seen?
Yeah, well, I love all the points that Denise shared, and especially that she was just sort of doing that in response to her students and sort of showing them sort of behind the scenes or under the hood, right? This is what I might do. And she and I have worked together on proposals for panels and different things, kind of tinkering around. I think one of the things that we've both learned from Saba Kidwai, who we follow on social media, is the best way to do prompts. She's got a really simple prompt formula. And I think that's one thing that can be really overwhelming. People share these big charts of like 500 prompts you can use. And Saba's formula is just really, really useful, her Spark formula. So yeah, something I'm working on, like I just really want to hear from my students. And, I really am trying, the one thing in my college is to get more student voice on panels and in rooms. I'm very uncomfortable on the listserv when people are talking about students and about the ways students are cheating and the ways they're responding to students cheating. I just don't like that power dynamic. It doesn't fit with my view of what we're doing. And of course, at the same time, right, like we want academic integrity and we want people to do their own work, of course, but I just feel like there's a different conversation we could be having. So I'm really interested in hearing from my students. And one thing I've already done is just sort of asking students, what do they know about AI and how are they using it and what do they want to know? And I'm developing that into a bigger lesson that's going to be like a public speaking unit where the students develop an AI manifesto. So sort of reframing policies or rules or even guidelines, but just sort of like starting from the beginning. What is a large language model? How is this information scraped from the internet? Where is it scraped from? What are the biases? What are some of the concerns around digital privacy and safety? What are some of the responses from like the Department of Education, for example? And, are you using these tools? How are you using them? What's confusing to you? What's your experience in classes? Sort of gathering all of that in sort of mini presentations and them just writing their own manifesto of sort of what AI is, how they're using it, how they want to use it, and, what they want to know. Like, I really want to hear from my students, what do you not know that you want to know? And the truth is that industry wants people who are prepared. They want them to come in with literacy in AI tools. And I think one of the things that concerns me is this kind of gatekeeping of our students. So if we say to them, you cannot use these AI tools, then we're not preparing them for the real world, right? We always talk about preparing our students for the real world. Well, the real world has AI in it. And I think particularly in community colleges, we serve students from, have really had the experience of marginalization because of race, because of poverty, because of homelessness, all sorts of reasons. And so if we're putting up more obstacles for them, then we're not really serving them and we're not preparing them, because you can be sure that students that are at private universities are using these tools and they have access to these tools. They're using the paid model of these tools. So those are sort of some of the things that are floating around. I mean, I'm in very early days of using it with my own students, but I'm sort of staying in conversation with them, and I'm doing a lot of training myself. We just came back from South by Southwest EDU. There were tons of stuff, tons of panels on AI. I'm in a 4-week course right now learning about it. I'm on webinars every week. So I'm just trying to build my own knowledge. I still honestly feel like a beginner, but I'm learning, right? So I'm sort of engaging with it as a learner.
I think you brought up a good point. we mentioned that teachers are overwhelmed just by how fast things move and how much we're expected to do. And I think that just saying it out loud, that we're all at the beginning. And I think one of Eric's favorite lines that I've, often repeated is we're at the beginning of the beginning. And so just understanding that wherever we are, that's movement forward, and that's part of any kind of learning process, right? We go through these stages, as Brent has mentioned. Are there any ways that you have approached, I guess, the issues of ethical use of AI? And since we're all in the beginning stages, what has been your approach in having those conversations with students?
It's so interesting because I surveyed all my students this semester, and so that's over 100 students, about their AI use and just their thoughts on it. And one of the themes that emerged was that students wanted clarity on these ethical conversations. Like, they want to know what's okay, and they don't want to use it in a way that is inappropriate, and they don't want to cheat, and they also don't. They have a fear that using it too much will make them lazy, or that they won't learn. So they have the same, kind of, thoughts or concerns, that teachers have on the other end, being like, oh, they're not going to learn. The students are like, I want to learn. How do I make sure I'm still learning? So I find that so interesting. So the first thing I did in my syllabus was say, like, we are going to be using it in different ways. But you are also not going to be turning in entire papers written by AI, and we'll have a conversation if it seems like, it's being overutilized. But that I encourage it for lots of different things, and that I'll point out during the semester times where I think it will be really helpful to use it. And a good example of that right now is I have this English 101 composition class. They're starting to brainstorm for their research project proposal. So everyone kind of brainstormed these bigger general topics. And so we had a conversation online about how might we be able to use AI to help them narrow their topic. Not choose their topic or create the proposal for them, but say, like, I'm really interested in, bad habits and how we overcome them. Like, that's too big of a topic for this academic paper. What are some other smaller subtopics under that, and what might I be interested in? So kind of giving them really specific times when it could be useful to use AI if they wanted to. And the other thing that I've always done is have students turn in a reflection letter with every major assignment. And the reflection letter is always, I tell them, I read this before I look at your paper and give feedback. So you have this opportunity to tell me, how is it working on this assignment? What went well? Where did you get support? What questions do you have? And the section on where did you get support, it used to be like, did you go to tutoring? Did you have somebody at home help you? Did you use it, some other tools? And so now it's like, in which ways did you get support or utilize AI in this particular assignment? Not as a really a way to catch them or accountability, but just so I can also learn how they're using it. I mean, for a way for them to share, like, oh, I did use it, for this paragraph, for the tone, or I did use Grammarly, because there's been a lot about how Grammarly is popping, if students use Grammarly for corrections, that it's popping up as completely, kind of AI written, which is not the case. So I feel like that reflection in the form of a letter is a really nice way for me to find out from students how they might have been utilizing it in their assignments.
I'll jump in here in the middle of this. So for me, I think one of the things, when you're talking about, there's so many things that students and teachers don't understand about how AI is developing its responses and developing what it's making, right? And so there's all this conversation about, is it ethical? Is it trained on stolen data? Is it representative properly for students? Whatever else it is. And so I think a lot of people say, well, just don't use it because, we're not sure where that's coming from. And it's like, it's a little bit unclear to me. To me, one of the conversations is, I kind of go back to, like, actually thinking about working with humans, and you say, well, if a human develops something that is inspired by another artist, so if we're talking about a physical image, right? If a human develops something that's inspired by another artist, there's some sort of level where we say, well, that's not stealing it, it's inspiration, right? Or it's using this idea to build the next its own next thing. And then there's a unwillingness on the AI conversation to accept any level. But I think when we get into things like plagiarism, any active teacher knows how hard it is to actually define when something is plagiarized versus when something is like, manipulated versus when it's like, hey, I got ideas from other places, but I kind of put it in my own. And it's like, it's not a black and white thing. It's a very, very, very gray scale from one end to the other. Right. And so the conversation when you say, well, hey, hold on a second, this is plagiarism. Let's just go with plagiarism as the idea here. This is plagiarism because it's built by AI and AI stole the ideas from the internet out there. And you go, well, I don't know that that's a clear definition for me, because how all humans learn is by interacting and learning from other people's words and experiences, and then building on top of those to build their own words and experiences or explanations of those things. And so if we're not applying that same definition to AI as we are to people, and again, that's got its own can of worms dealing with that, but to me, that's kind of how I see the conversation when I'm looking at part of the ethics of stolen information, which is a problem, don't get me wrong, right? Like I want to understand that and I want it to be clarified, but I also want to say I don't think it's as easy just to put it into one category as into another category. And so that's a part where I get a little bit uneasy with a dictated answer. It is like, this is how it is and this is how clear it is. It's like, well, this is actually pretty messy, and I think there are some points to that we want to continue to discuss. So those are kind of my experiences. And Dia, I'm not sure if what you've been dealing with here.
Yeah, well, as you're speaking, Brent, I'm thinking how artists traditionally would copy the paintings of masters. That's how they learned.
We were just mentioning that. Mm-hmm.
So, and also the same thing with writing, like mentor text. So sort of if we see writing as a craft, as opposed to, I don't know, a formula or something like that, it could change our perspective. I mean, I think acceptable use policy is something people are talking about. One of the presentations I went to at South by was someone from the Department of Ed and someone from Digital Promise. And they were just talking about how that ed tech has been really unregulated up until now. So I think on a meta level, keeping in conversation with these developers, and really sort of seeing what are the tools that we want. And then also, who are the developers? Who's represented in those rooms and who's not? And we noticed when we were at South by that we went to panels by a lot of people of color, and they were all talking about representation, in the large language models. And the presentations by white presenters didn't talk about that at all. So that was really interesting. So who are in these spaces? And there were just some really interesting things about the biases that are baked into the tools. And so, I'm interested in academic integrity, but also the integrity of the tools themselves and sort of how we stay in conversations and what are the expectations that we have for these tools and who they're actually representing.
Mm-hmm. Eric, what are your experiences around the ethical considerations?
Well, I think they're mixed. There's a side of me that feels like there's been almost a rushing forward with the vocabulary of virtue, and kind of condemning. Before I understand it, I've already labeled it immoral, and then looking for justifications. I'm really glad that I teach at USC, which as an institution has taken the position that AI is part of the future and the present, and that the future will be built on the decisions made in the present. And so they're trying to raise $1 billion for the study of generative AI in various forms. And each of the 24 schools is expected to participate in that. And what are the social consequences? And so as a result, we don't have a choice on whether or not we're going to use AI. or mention it in our curriculum, we have to mention it in our syllabus. And they give us 3 broad areas. You can say, I'm not interested in AI, and it's just all verboten. But that's clearly not what the institution wants. The second one is we are going to use AI, and we're going to be transparent in our use of it, kind of like Denise's reflection memo, so that we have it. And this is, I think, really wise, because before this happened, when ChatGPT first came out, and I tried to get students to tell me about what they were doing, there was so much fear of what the academic rules were as written that they felt like, well, I don't want to tell Eric, who then feels obligated to tell somebody, and maybe I get expelled or reprimanded, or I broke some rules. So then it really put a damper on candid communication, I felt. So I was very glad when USC very quickly said, AI is here. We see possibilities for it. We want to be part of that story and how it's developed and deployed in society, and in our classrooms. So the second option is just be transparent. The third option is you just do whatever you want, and we'll make sure that we're still going to check everything with Turnitin, but I'm not going to ask you for the details. And I think that clearly was kind of set up as a all nothing or something reasonable in between, go for the golden mean. So that's what people do. And I'm also very curious about how students use AI. And I think one thing that was a surprise to me was a lot of students were using it as like a friend, a companion, as a chatbot. And one student even told me it was their best friend. And I'm thinking that's so sad and lonely. But I do think that there are a lot of creative possibilities of the technology that students are going to be far more open to and far more advanced, because teachers are trying to figure out what's the right way to do it or not do it. And I don't want to use it until I understand everything. We're never going to understand everything. We're at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. We're all learners here. We're all bumbling around. And a lot of the early attempts of this, we had ChatGPT, as you recall, announced in late November, early December, quickly used. And by February, we had a number of the same companies claiming that they were able to detect when it was used. And that was bogus. And it was very quickly understood to be bogus. And so one of my unfortunate experiences was Turnitin told me that a student had 78% AI generated text. But I had seen the student do a lot of work in class, and I taught the student in another class, and I just didn't think that was the case. Part of the methodology that they use that caused this large number of false positives is if you chose a difficult intellectual topic, a sophisticated, let's say, 12th grade reading level topic, but you only had a vocabulary of, let's say, 4th or 5th grade level vocabulary, then they saw that gap, and then they said, oh, that's likely to be AI generated. And that false methodology, it took several months, but by July of that year, they had introduced it in February and March, and by July and August, almost everybody except Turnitin had withdrawn the tool because it was creating too many false positives, too many people were threatening lawsuits, and it wasn't plausible. Well, I discovered that in that awkward moment with that student, because I felt like, here's what the tool's telling me. The student says it didn't happen. I kind of believe the student. but I don't want this 78% to be on the, the administration can see what I see. And so we just kind of agreed that we would change the topic and do a different paper she was interested in, and it would be a simpler vocabulary, and it would not be as prone to these kind of things. I think it's a very tough question. So it's a long answer, but I've tried to incorporate AI into every assignment now. Now, I don't make it an AI assignment per se, but if we're doing restaurant reviews, the first thing I might come up with is give us 5 key words for a restaurant, and then go out and try to build it. So we're doing things like that. So
great. But I think we're going to jump into our final question because we are going to run out of time here. I'll run this question. This is just kind of a look at the future, right? Kind of from your own experiences, where do you see things going? And how do you envision the technologies evolving to meet the needs of educators and students in the coming years? And actually, Ishelle, we haven't heard much from you today. So so I want to hear your thoughts on this first, if that's okay.
I think, well, number one, personally, I feel overwhelmed. As a teacher, I feel overwhelmed. I'm at the stage where I want to turn off the AI. And working with international students, I find that many of them have not had a chance to see these technologies because they're not available in their country. And if they are, they're a very limited version of that. And so when I'm thinking of how it's going to evolve, I'm thinking that it's going to be maybe more widely used, and then students will slowly start to see groups of students arriving with some knowledge, but not the critical thinking piece, because perhaps in that nation it's severely limited, or it's maybe their form of, I guess I'm thinking their own copy of whatever we have made. Where I see it, I think our students are going to be overwhelmed just as we are. So a lot of my students don't come with any knowledge about it's new to them, brand new, and they are amazed initially, and then you see like the shock on their face at the possibility, but I see just overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed.
Yeah. I'm coming up with this as you're saying this, I'm thinking of this like volcano analogy, right? Where it's like we're used to living on a certain set of land, and then the volcano explodes and it completely changes the landscape. And then when we first live in that new landscape, we're like, we don't know how to live with the land. We don't know how to navigate things. We don't know where our neighbors are. And then it takes time. And then at some point we're kind of back into, okay, now we understand what the new roads and the new area looks like around all of this, but it's not the same thing as it was before. Right. No, and so, and we're not always happy with that either. Right. And so it's it's a bit tricky, but Denise, what are your thoughts about the future here?
Yeah, I think in some ways it might become easier just because every time I open up anything now, it's part of it. So I think we'll get to a point where it's not this separate entity. It's just part of it. And I think it'll just get easier. In fact, actually, I think that the equity gaps will become larger. I mean, just hearing Eric and what's going on at USC compared to, what's going on at the community college level, my goal is always that our students need to be prepared, right? And I just tell them right off, I don't want you to leave here not understanding what's going on. And so if we don't prepare them to have the full extent of knowledge of the tools that are available to them, then we're really putting them at a disservice, right? And I think to Mudra's point, I think the workforce will drive how we educate our students. So I think and then I think, we've got the early adopters and, the different stages of grief with any new tool. I think, the swing will happen. And I think maybe things will calm down a little, and then people will integrate things more slowly. But I don't think we can ignore it and pretend that it's not there. And I know I'm not.
Can't turn it off. Can't turn it off.
What wrong thing they're doing. That's just not my deal. And actually, I got that phrase from Mudra. So,
so with that, Mudra,
yeah. Well, something I heard at South by Southwest was charismatic technology, and so I think there's going to be like AI developed specifically marketed to educational institutions, and we have to be very careful about those wrappers. Just like Turnitin has done such a good job at marketing to teachers and to institutions, that people trust Turnitin more than they trust their own students. And so, we don't necessarily need educational AI. There are a lot of tools that we can use and adapt as they are. So I would be careful about that. And I'm also just really concerned about the digital divide, like on so many levels, like even in terms of the vision of our leadership, hearing what's happening at USC, so different from what's happening at our community colleges. So that vision. But then even our students, a lot of them don't have access to devices or to Wi-Fi, or even access in terms of accessibility of the tools. So I think all of those things need to evolve.
Eric, any thoughts here?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of technologies that have offered opportunities to dramatically humanize and improve education over the last half century that didn't realize their potential. And so the gap between what's possible and what's probable seems significant here. I share Denise's idea that we want to make sure the students in our classroom do the best they can, and that they're ready. When ChatGPT first came out, the response of some large public school districts was just to ban it across the board. And it was very naive and fear-driven and counterproductive, because everyone needs to have access to these tools. I also think, something like, the incorporation of AI into more and more everyday tools, so it won't be a separate time. I think it's a brilliant point. And no one says don't use Google, or don't use search engines, or don't use YouTube. They all run on AI. So it's the same thing now. It's a little bit more explicit. I also do worry about accuracy and AI hallucinations. I mean, there is something really wrong if you put in an image of a pope and you get back someone who's clearly never been a pope. That's not good. Accuracy matters. And I think that I had falsely assumed that there would be an evolution of, well, this will be for lawyers, this will be for doctors, this will be for educators, and they'll use more refined, appropriate. But I just read this afternoon that even with the AI programs that were designed just for law firms, 75% hallucinations. That's utterly unacceptable. So I think that is giving us a sense of what's possible as a creative tool. It's phenomenal, but it still has a long way to go. You talked before about the Russian proverb, trust but verify. And I think that with AI, it's a situation of distrust. And then maybe verify. But the first answer, it can be very simple things. I asked for a list of 25 quotes on democracy from Asian leaders in the 20th century. And I got back 20 quotes, and 8 of them were not by Asians. And, I don't know how they confuse John Kennedy, even if he's giving the speech elsewhere, for an Asian leader. So then he gets better with better prompts. You get better answers. So I think we need to teach how to write prompts and spend a lot of time on prompt writing. But having said that, I think it's here. I think we just have to kind of allow ourselves permission to make mistakes, because everybody's going to be making mistakes, and try to be open and transparent. Because I don't think anyone really knows, including the software engineers, the computer scientists that are working on this, how to make it work always the way they want. So I just think we're on this ride, and I hope we can enjoy the ride a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that is the perfect place to wrap up today's conversation. I'm sure this will be one of many conversations around the topic of AI in education with other educators. all of our guests today, Daya, Denise, Eric, are featured in many of our episodes, but particularly episode 100. So if you're curious, be sure to check out episode 100, and we'll be sure we'll come back with some other of those other questions. Thank you so much for taking time and spending it with us talking about AI.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great conversation.